Hello, everyone. Today, we have a very special story for you to practice your English listening and reading skills. It is a story about new beginnings, about how small acts of kindness can change lives, and about finding hope when you feel lost. Before we begin, I have a simple question for you. What is your favorite drink to have in a cafe? It can be coffee, tea, or something else. Please tell us in the comments below. Chapter 1. The Empty Space. Arthur felt like an empty space. For 30 years, his life was full. It was full of his job at the city office. It was full of his wife, Sarah. It was full of the comfortable sounds of a shared life, the quiet hum of the television in the evening, the sound of 2 coffee cups being placed on the kitchen table in the morning, the easy laughter. Now, all of it was gone. The silence in his small house was the loudest sound he had ever known. His job was the first thing to go. The city was making changes, they said. His position was no longer needed. A man of 55, with a good record and years of service, was told to go home. He received a small box for his personal things and a handshake that felt cold and quick. Arthur walked out of the office building that day and felt like a stranger in his own city. For 30 years, he had walked to that building every morning. Now he had nowhere to go. 6 months later, Sarah was gone too. It was a sickness that came quickly and took her away even faster. One day, she was complaining of a small pain. The next month, doctors were using quiet voices and sad eyes. Arthur sat by her bed, holding her hand, feeling it grow cooler. The easy laughter left their home first. Then, the morning coffee, for 2, became coffee for 1. The silence that followed her last breath was a heavy blanket that covered everything in his world. So Arthur found himself at 56, with no job, no wife, and a house that felt too big and too quiet. His savings were not huge, but they were enough. Enough to live on for a few years if he was careful, but he did not want to just live. He wanted to feel something again. He was tired of the empty space inside him. He started walking. Every day he would leave his silent house and just walk through the city streets. He did not have a destination. He just wanted to see people, to hear the sounds of life around him. He walked through busy downtown streets where people rushed past him, their faces full of purpose. He walked through green parks where children laughed and dogs chased balls. He walked through quiet neighborhoods where houses stood in neat rows. It was on one of these walks that he saw it. It was a small shop on a quiet corner in a part of the city he did not know well. The windows were covered in dust and old newspapers. A sign faded by the sun said, "For rent." It had been a flower shop once, he thought, or maybe a small bookstore. It was empty now, another empty space. Arthur stopped and looked at it for a long time. The street was not busy. A few old trees lined the sidewalk. The buildings were mostly apartments, with a small grocery store and a laundry place nearby. It was a simple, quiet neighborhood. People lived here. They had lives, routines. They probably needed a place to sit, to drink a cup of coffee. An idea started to form in his mind. It was a small, quiet idea, like a tiny seed falling onto empty ground. What if he could fill this empty space? What if he could create a place that was not silent and empty, but warm and full of the gentle sounds of life? A place for coffee. A small cafe. He had never run a business before. He had never been a cook or a server. He was a man who had spent his life with papers and numbers in a grey office. But he knew how to make coffee. Sarah had always said he made the best coffee. It was a small thing, but it was something. The idea was crazy. He knew it was crazy. His savings would be gone in a few months if it failed. He would have nothing left. But the thought of it made him feel something. For the first time in a year, it was not sadness or loss. It was a tiny spark of something else. Maybe it was excitement. Maybe it was fear. But it was better than the cold emptiness. He looked at the dusty windows of the little shop. He imagined them clean and bright. He imagined a warm light inside. He imagined small wooden tables, the smell of fresh coffee and pastries. He imagined people sitting, reading, talking quietly. He imagined the empty space being filled, not just in the shop, but inside himself too. He took a deep breath. The air was cool and carried the scent of rain coming later. He walked to the sign on the window and found a phone number. He took out his old phone, the one Sarah had bought for him, and he dialed the number. When a voice answered, Arthur spoke clearly. "Hello," he said. "I am calling about the empty shop on the corner of Maple Street. I would like to see it." It was the most important sentence he had spoken in a very long time. Chapter 2. The Sound of Work. The inside of the shop was worse than he had imagined. The dust was thick on every surface, like a grey blanket. The floor was old and stained. The walls were a pale yellow colour that was peeling and sad. There was a small counter at the back, and a dark room behind it that was probably a storage area. The air was stale and smelled of forgotten things. It was a forgotten place. The man showing him the shop, the owner, was named Mr. Henderson. He was a tired-looking man with a kind but weary smile. "It needs a lot of work," Mr. Henderson said, stating the obvious. "It has been empty for 3 years." Arthur walked through the space. He ran a hand over the dusty counter. He looked up at the ceiling, where a single, bare light bulb hung. Most people would have seen only the dirt and the decay. But Arthur saw something else. He saw the way the morning light came through the 2 large front windows. He saw that the room was a good, simple shape. It was not too big and not too small. It had potential. It could be warm. It could be clean. "I'll take it," Arthur said. The words surprised even himself. Mr. Henderson raised his eyebrows. "Are you sure? You haven't even asked about the price." "How much is it?" Arthur asked. The price was reasonable. It was fair. It would take a large piece of his savings. But it would not take everything. He had enough left for the work that needed to be done. So the journey began. For the next 2 months, Arthur's life was not silent anymore. It was filled with the sound of work. He woke up early every morning, made himself a simple breakfast and a flask of hot coffee, and went to the shop. He was the first one there and the last one to leave. He started with cleaning. He spent a whole week just cleaning. He swept away years of dust and dirt. He scrubbed the floors on his hands and knees. He washed the large windows until they sparkled, letting the sunlight flood into the room. It was hard, physical work. His body ached at the end of each day, but it was a good kind of ache. It was the ache of creating something, not the ache of emptiness. After the cleaning, he started to repair. He was not a builder or a carpenter, but he was a careful man. He learned from videos he watched on the internet. He learned how to fix the broken plaster on the walls. He learned how to sand the old wooden floors until they were smooth and beautiful again. He spent hours and hours with sandpaper in his hand, feeling the rough wood become gentle under his touch. Then came the painting. He chose a warm, creamy color for the walls. He wanted the place to feel like a soft hug. He painted every inch himself, carefully, with slow and steady strokes of the brush. As the new color covered the old sad yellow, the room started to change. It began to feel brighter, happier. It started to feel like his. He hired an electrician to fix the old wiring and install new lights. He did not want harsh, bright lights. He chose soft, warm lamps that he could place around the room. He wanted the light to be gentle on the eyes, to make people feel relaxed. He also hired a plumber to install a new, clean bathroom and the pipes needed for his coffee machine and sink. These were the only things he did not do himself. It was important that they were done correctly and safely. The biggest purchase was the coffee machine. It was a beautiful, shiny espresso machine from Italy. It was expensive, more expensive than he had planned. It took a very large part of his remaining money. But Arthur knew it was the heart of the cafe. It had to be good. He spent a week just learning how to use it, how to make the perfect shot of espresso, how to steam milk until it was like silk. He made hundreds of cups of coffee, tasting each one, trying to make it better. He bought furniture from second-hand stores. He found small, sturdy wooden tables and a collection of different chairs. He did not want them to all be the same. He wanted the cafe to feel like a comfortable living room, not a formal restaurant. He sanded and varnished each table and chair himself, bringing out the natural beauty of the wood. He built a long bookshelf along one wall. He went to used bookshops and bought boxes of old books. He chose books with interesting covers, books of poetry, old novels, travel stories. He wanted his customers to have something to read, something to get lost in for a little while. Every day, the empty space became less empty. It filled up with the smell of new paint and clean wood. It filled up with tables and chairs and books. It filled up with Arthur's hard work and his growing hope. People in the neighborhood started to notice. They would walk by and look in through the clean windows. They saw the old, forgotten shop changing. They saw Arthur inside, always working, always focused. Some would nod to him. Some would give him a small smile. He was a quiet man, so he would just nod back. But their small gestures of connection made him feel less alone. Finally, the day came when there was nothing left to do. The floors were polished. The walls were painted. The furniture was in place. The beautiful coffee machine gleamed on the counter. The bookshelves were full. The cafe was ready. Arthur stood in the middle of the room, in the quiet of the evening. He looked around at what he had built. It was simple. It was not fancy. But it was clean and warm and welcoming. He had filled the empty shop. He had replaced the silence with the quiet hum of the new refrigerator and the promise of a coffee machine. Now all he needed were the people, and he was not sure if they would come. Chapter 3. The First Cup. Arthur decided to open on a Tuesday. Tuesdays felt quiet and unimportant, a good day for a soft start. He did not put up a big, grand opening sign. He just wrote on a small chalkboard and placed it on the sidewalk. The writing was simple and clear. The Second Chance Cafe, open. That morning, he woke up before the sun. His heart was beating a little faster than usual. It was the feeling of standing at the edge of something new. He showered, put on a clean white shirt and a simple black apron. He looked at himself in the mirror. He looked like a cafe owner. The thought was strange and a little bit frightening. He walked to the cafe as the city was slowly waking up. The streetlights were still on, casting a soft glow. He unlocked the door and stepped inside. The air was cool and smelled of coffee beans, a smell he was starting to love. He turned on the lights, the warm lamps casting a gentle light across the room. He turned on the espresso machine. It hummed to life, the sound filling the quiet space. It was the cafe's heartbeat. He had baked pastries the night before, simple things, croissants, blueberry muffins, and slices of lemon cake. He had practiced the recipes for weeks. Using Sarah's old cookbooks, he arranged them carefully on plates on the counter. They looked nice. They looked inviting. At 7 o'clock, he turned the sign on the door from closed to open. Then he stood behind the counter and waited. And waited. The sun came up completely. The street outside became busier. People walked by on their way to work. Cars drove past. A few people looked in through the window. They saw him standing there, alone in his new cafe. They saw the clean tables and the books on the shelves. But they kept walking. 7 o'clock became 8 o'clock. 8 o'clock became 9. Not a single person came in. Arthur's small spark of hope began to feel smaller. The fear began to grow. Maybe this was a huge mistake. Maybe nobody in this neighborhood wanted a quiet little cafe. Maybe he was just a foolish old man who had wasted all his money. He made himself a cup of coffee. He tried to tell himself that it was okay. Businesses need time to grow. It was only the first day, but the silence in the cafe was starting to feel like the silence in his house. It was a heavy, lonely silence. Just as he was starting to believe he would spend the entire day alone, the small bell above the door jingled. Arthur's head snapped up. A young woman stood just inside the door, shaking rain from her umbrella. It had started to rain outside without him noticing. She had bright red hair tied up in a messy bun. She wore paint-stained jeans and a large dark coat. She carried a big flat portfolio under one arm. Her eyes scanned the room, looking a little nervous, a little curious. "Are you open?" she asked. Her voice was quiet. "Yes," Arthur said, his own voice sounding a little strange from not being used all morning. "Yes, we are." She smiled a little, a quick, shy smile. She walked to the counter, her boots making soft sounds on the wooden floor. She looked at the pastries, then at the coffee machine. "Could I just get a black coffee, please? To go." "Of course," Arthur said. He felt a wave of relief. His first customer. He turned to the machine, his hands moving carefully. He tried to remember all the steps he had practiced. Grind the beans, tamp the coffee, lock the handle in place, place the cup underneath, press the button. The rich, dark liquid began to flow. The smell was wonderful. He handed her the cup. "That will be $2, he said. She opened her wallet and gave him the money. As he was giving her the change, she looked around the cafe again. "This is a nice place," she said. "It's very calm." "Thank you," Arthur said. "I just opened today." "Oh, really? I'm your first customer," she asked, a little surprised. Arthur nodded. "You are." She smiled again, a little wider this time. "Well, good luck with it." She took her portfolio and her coffee and walked to the door. Just before she left, she turned back. "The coffee smells amazing, by the way." And then she was gone. The bell jingled again as the door closed. Arthur was alone again, but this time, the silence did not feel so heavy. It felt different. He looked at the $2 in his hand. It was the first money his cafe had ever made. He had done it. He had sold his first cup of coffee. He put the $2 in the cash register. He felt a small smile form on his own face. It was just one customer. It was just one cup of coffee. But it was a start. It was a second chance. Chapter 4. The Artist. The next day, the young woman with the red hair came back. She came at the same time, just after 9 o'clock. She ordered the same thing, a black coffee to go. She smiled her shy smile, paid her $2, and left. She came back the day after that, and the day after that. She became a part of Arthur's morning routine. He started to have her coffee ready for her. When he saw her coming down the street, she seemed to appreciate this small gesture. Her smile became a little less shy. One day, about a week after the cafe opened, it was raining very hard. The young woman came in, shaking water from her coat like a wet dog. She ordered her coffee, but this time she did not say to go. Instead, she looked at the empty tables. "Do you mind if I sit for a little while?" she asked. "Just until the rain stops?" "Not at all," Arthur said. "Please, stay as long as you like." She chose a small table by the window. She took off her wet coat and sat down. She opened her large portfolio on the table. Arthur could see that it was filled with drawings. They were beautiful. Detailed sketches of buildings and people and trees. She was an artist. She took a sip of her coffee and looked out the window at the rain. Arthur went back to wiping the counter, pretending not to watch her. But he was curious. He had very few customers. Most days, only a handful of people came in, mostly for a quick coffee to take away. The tables were almost always empty. She stayed for over an hour. She did not draw. She just sat and watched the rain, slowly drinking her coffee. The cafe was quiet, with only the sound of the rain against the window and the hum of the coffee machine. It was a peaceful sound. When the rain finally slowed to a soft drizzle, she packed up her portfolio. She came to the counter to put her empty cup down. "Thank you," she said. "This was nice. You are very talented," Arthur said, surprising himself with his own words. He nodded towards her portfolio. "Your drawings. I couldn't help but see." She blushed a little, a pale pink color on her cheeks. "Oh, thank you. It's just a hobby." "It looks like more than a hobby," Arthur said gently. She looked down at her portfolio. I want to be an illustrator, but it's difficult. It's hard to find work. It's hard to show your art to people." Arthur understood difficulty. He understood feeling like you were not seen. "Well," he said slowly, thinking, "I have a lot of empty wall space here." He looked around at the clean, creamy white walls. "They are a little bit boring." She looked up at him, her eyes wide. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Arthur said, "if you wanted to, you could hang some of your drawings here, on the walls. People could see them then. I would not charge you anything, of course." The young woman stared at him. She looked from his face to the empty walls and back again. She looked like she could not believe what she was hearing. "Really?" she whispered. "You would do that?" "Yes," Arthur said simply. "I think they would make the place look nicer." Her name was Lily. 2 days later, she came back to the cafe, not with her portfolio, but with 5 framed drawings. They were beautiful pictures of the quiet streets in their neighborhood. One was of the old laundry place. Another was of the large oak tree in the small park down the road. She had a wonderful eye for finding beauty in simple, everyday things. Arthur helped her hang them on the large wall opposite the counter. As soon as the last picture was up, the whole cafe felt different. The drawings added color and life and personality to the room. They made the space feel even warmer, more complete. "They look wonderful," Arthur said, and he meant it. Lily stood back, looking at her art on the wall of a public place for the first time. A huge, genuine smile spread across her face. It was the first time Arthur had seen her truly smile, without any shyness. "Thank you," she said, her voice full of emotion. "Thank you, Arthur." From that day on, Lily was no longer just a customer. She was a friend. She came in every day, but now she often stayed. She would sit at her favorite table by the window and sketch in her book. Her presence made the cafe feel less empty, and something else started to happen. Other customers, the few that came in, would notice the drawings. They would walk over to the wall and look at them. "Who is the artist?" they would ask. "These are really good." And Arthur would proudly say, "Her name is Lily. She sits right over there." It was a small thing, but it was a connection. It was the start of a community. The cafe was no longer just Arthur's place. It was Lily's gallery too. Chapter 5. The Old Man and the Newspaper. Business was still slow. Arthur was paying his rent and his bills, but he was not making much money. Some days, he felt a familiar worry creep into his mind, but then he would look at Lily's drawings on the wall, or he would make a perfect cup of coffee, and the worry would fade a little. He was not just running a business, he was building a place, and building takes time. About a month after Lily hung her drawings, another person started to become a regular fixture at the Second Chance Cafe. He was an elderly man, probably in his 80s. He walked slowly with a wooden cane. He wore an old but clean tweed jacket, no matter the weather. The first time he came in, he looked around the cafe for a long time before he ordered. His eyes were a pale, watery blue, and they seemed to see everything. He looked at the books on the shelf, the different chairs, and Lily's drawings on the wall. He walked to the counter and ordered a cup of tea and a slice of lemon cake. His voice was soft and crackled like old paper. Arthur served him, and the man took his tea and cake to a comfortable-looking armchair in the corner. He took a newspaper out of his jacket pocket, put on a pair of reading glasses, and began to read. He stayed for 2 hours. He drank his tea very slowly and ate his cake with small, careful bites. He read his newspaper from the first page to the last. He did not speak to anyone. When he was finished, he brought his empty cup and plate to the counter, nodded once to Arthur, and left. The next day, he came back at the same time, in the middle of the afternoon. He ordered the same thing, tea and lemon cake. He sat in the same armchair and read his newspaper. He did this every single day. He became as regular as the afternoon sun that slanted through the front windows. Arthur was a quiet man, and he respected the old man's silence. He did not try to make small talk. He would simply smile and nod when the man came in, and have his tea and cake ready for him. But he was curious about him. What was his story? Where did he come from? Did he have any family? One afternoon, Arthur was cleaning the bookshelf, putting the books in a neat order, when he noticed the old man watching him. The man had finished his newspaper and was just sitting, looking at the books. "Are you looking for something to read?" Arthur asked gently. The old man seemed surprised to be spoken to. He looked down at his hands for a moment before answering. No, he said. "I was just admiring them. It's a nice collection." "Thank you," Arthur said. "You can borrow one if you like. You can take it home." The man looked up, his pale blue eyes wide. "Oh, I couldn't do that." "Of course you can," Arthur insisted. "Just bring it back when you are done." The old man thought about it for a moment. Then slowly, he got up from his chair and walked over to the bookshelf. He ran a thin, wrinkled finger along the spines of the books. He finally chose an old book of poems by Robert Frost. He held it in his hands like it was something precious. "My wife, she loved poetry," he said, his voice barely a whisper. Arthur had to lean closer to hear him. It was the first time he had spoken about anything personal. "She passed away last year," the man continued, not looking at Arthur, but at the book in his hands. "The house is very quiet now." Arthur knew that quiet. He knew it very well. "I'm very sorry," he said, and the words were real and full of empathy. The old man finally looked at him. He saw something in Arthur's eyes, a shared understanding of loss. "My name is George," he said. "I'm Arthur," Arthur replied. From that day on, their routine changed slightly. George would still come in every afternoon. He would still order tea and lemon cake and read his newspaper. But after he finished reading, he would talk to Arthur for a few minutes. Sometimes he would talk about an article in the newspaper. Sometimes he would talk about a poem he had read in the book he borrowed. Mostly, he talked about his wife, Eleanor. He told Arthur about how they met, about the garden she loved, about the funny way she used to laugh. As he spoke, it was like he was bringing her back to life for a few moments in the quiet cafe. Arthur was a good listener. He did not say much. He just listened and nodded and refilled George's teacup. He realized that George did not come to the cafe just for the tea or the cake. He came for the company. He came to have a place to go where he was not alone with his quiet house and his memories. He came because, for a little while, he could share his story with someone who understood. The Second Chance Cafe. was becoming a place for more than just coffee. It was becoming a place for stories. It was a place for quiet connection. It was a place where a lonely old man could find a friend. Chapter 6. A Splash of Color. The cafe was slowly finding its rhythm. The mornings belonged to Lily and the few other customers on their way to work. The afternoons belonged to George and his newspaper. The quiet hours in between were for Arthur to read, to bake, and to think. He was not making a lot of money, but he was paying his bills. More importantly, he was not lonely anymore. The silence was gone, replaced by the gentle hum of the cafe's life. One afternoon, a new sound was added to the mix. It was a loud, frustrated sigh from Lily's corner. She had been staring at a blank page in her sketchbook for over an hour, a frown on her face. Arthur walked over to her table. "Everything okay, Lily?" he asked. She looked up, her expression full of frustration. "No," she said, pushing a strand of red hair from her face. "I have a block, an artist's block. I can't draw anything. My mind is as empty as this page." She was supposed to be working on a new set of drawings. A local gallery owner had seen her art on the cafe walls and had asked her to create more pieces for a small exhibition. It was a huge opportunity for her, the chance she had been dreaming of. But the pressure was making it difficult for her to be creative. "Everything I try to draw looks terrible," she said miserably. "It's all gray and boring. I have no new ideas." Arthur looked at her blank page. Then he looked around his cafe. The walls were a warm cream color. The furniture was natural wood. It was calm and peaceful. But maybe, he thought, it was a little too calm. Maybe it needed a little bit of energy, a little bit of bright, happy color. He had an idea. It was a little bit crazy, like his idea to open the cafe in the first place. "Lily," he said slowly, "I have a proposition for you." "A proposition?" she asked, looking confused. "Yes. You say you have no ideas, that everything is gray. I say my cafe needs some more color, specifically that wall." He pointed to the large, blank wall behind the counter. "It's very boring." Lily looked at the wall. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking of a mural," Arthur said. "A painting, right on the wall. Something big and colorful. Something that tells a story. The story of this neighborhood, maybe. Or the story of second chances." Lily's eyes widened. "A mural? I've never painted a mural before. That's huge." "You could do it," Arthur said with confidence. "Think of it. Not a small page in a book, but a giant canvas. You wouldn't have to worry about making a mistake you can't fix. It's just paint. We can always paint over it if you don't like it," he continued, the idea growing in his mind. "I would pay you, of course, for your time and for the supplies. And it would be great for you. The gallery owner would see it. Everyone who comes in here would see it. It would be your biggest piece yet." Lily looked from Arthur's hopeful face to the big blank wall. The fear in her eyes was slowly being replaced by a spark of excitement, a challenge, something new and different to break her out of her creative block. "A mural," she said again, this time with a small smile. "Okay, Arthur, let's do it." The next week, the cafe was transformed into an art studio. Lily arrived with cans of paint in every color imaginable, brushes of all sizes, and a large drop cloth to protect the floor. She spent the first day just sketching her idea onto the wall with a pencil. Her design was a beautiful mix of images. There were the familiar buildings from the neighborhood, the old oak tree from the park, but they were woven together with images of people drinking coffee, reading books, and talking. In the center of it all, she drew a large steaming coffee cup, with the steam turning into swirling patterns of leaves and flowers. Then she began to paint. The cafe was filled with the smell of fresh paint. Lily worked for hours every day, completely lost in her creation. She was no longer blocked. She was overflowing with creativity. She hummed as she worked, her face and clothes quickly becoming covered in splashes of blue, green, and yellow paint. Arthur, George, and the other few regular customers watched in fascination as the mural came to life. Every day, a new detail would appear. A small cat sleeping on a windowsill, a child chasing a butterfly, a book left open on a table. The mural was not just a painting. It was a collection of happy, peaceful moments. It took her 2 weeks to finish. On the final day, she added the last brushstroke and stepped back. The wall was alive with color and movement and story. It was joyful and beautiful and full of hope. It completely transformed the cafe, making it feel vibrant and full of energy. "It's perfect," Arthur said, his voice full of awe. Lily was beaming, her face tired, but incredibly happy. "It's the best thing I've ever done," she said. Her artist block was completely gone, replaced by a newfound confidence. The mural became a talking point for everyone who came into the cafe. New customers started to come in, drawn by the beautiful artwork they could see through the window. They would stand and look at it, finding new details every time. Lily's mural was more than just a decoration. It was the soul of the cafe, painted right onto the wall. Chapter 7. A Lost Boy. The mural brought more people to the cafe. It was not a flood of customers, but a slow, steady trickle. A few more faces each day. The Second Chance Cafe was becoming known in the neighborhood as the place with the beautiful painting. Arthur had to hire a part-time helper for the busiest hours, a friendly college student named Maria. He was finally making a small profit. He felt a quiet sense of pride. He had built this. One cold autumn afternoon, the bell on the door jingled, and a new person walked in. He was a boy, maybe 16 or 17 years old. He was tall and thin, and wore a dark hooded sweatshirt that hid most of his face. He walked with his shoulders hunched, as if trying to make himself smaller. He did not come to the counter. Instead, he went straight to the back of the cafe, to the most hidden table in the corner. He sat down and put his head in his hands. He did not take off his hood. Arthur watched him from behind the counter. The boy looked troubled. He looked lost. Arthur knew that look. He remembered feeling that way himself not so long ago. Arthur waited a few minutes, but the boy did not move. He decided to approach him. He poured a glass of water and carried it over to the table. "Hello," Arthur said softly. "Here's some water." The boy looked up, startled. His face was young, with dark, sad eyes. He had a smudge of dirt on his cheek. I don't have any money," the boy mumbled, looking down at the table again. "The water is free," Arthur said with a small smile. "And you look like you could use a place to sit for a while. It's cold outside." The boy did not answer. He just stared at the glass of water. "My name is Arthur," Arthur said, pulling up a chair and sitting down. He did not want to stand over the boy. He wanted to be at his level. "What's yours?" The boy hesitated. "Leo," he said finally. "It's nice to meet you, Leo," Arthur said. "Is everything all right?" Leo shook his head. A small jerky movement. A tear rolled down his cheek, and he quickly wiped it away with the sleeve of his sweatshirt. "I had a fight with my mom," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I said some stupid things. I ran away." Arthur nodded slowly. He did not judge. He just listened. "Fights happen," he said calmly. "Sometimes we say things we don't mean when we are angry." "She won't want to see me again," Leo said, his voice cracking. "I was horrible to her." "I am sure that is not true," Arthur said gently. "She is probably very worried about you right now. She's your mother. She loves you." Arthur thought about his own life. He had no children. He and Sarah had wanted them, but it never happened. He wondered what it would feel like to have a son. To worry about him like Leo's mother must be worrying right now. Would you like something hot to drink? Arthur offered. A hot chocolate, perhaps. On the house. It's a good drink for a cold day. Leo looked up at him, his sad eyes full of surprise. Why are you being so nice to me? Arthur thought for a moment before he answered. Because this is a place for second chances, he said. And because you look like you need a little bit of kindness right now. Arthur brought Leo a large mug of hot chocolate, topped with whipped cream. Leo held the warm mug in his cold hands and drank it slowly. The warmth seemed to relax him. His shoulders unhunched a little. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Arthur did not push him to talk. He just sat there with him, offering his quiet presence. Finally, Leo spoke. What should I do? He asked, looking at Arthur as if he had all the answers. Well, Arthur said, you have a choice. You can stay angry and alone out here in the cold. Or you can go home, say you are sorry, and have a warm meal with your mother. He smiled. I think the second option is much better. What if she's still angry? Leo asked, his voice small. She might be, Arthur admitted, but she will also be very happy to see that you are safe. The anger will pass. The love will not. Leo finished his hot chocolate. He sat for a few more minutes, thinking. Then he stood up. Okay, he said, taking a deep breath. I'm going to go home. He looked at Arthur, his expression grateful. Thank you, he said, for the hot chocolate, and for everything. You are welcome anytime, Leo, Arthur said. Leo walked to the door. He paused and looked back at the cafe, at the warm lights and the colorful mural. Then he left, pulling his hood up against the wind. Arthur watched him go, hoping he was walking home. The cafe was quiet again. Arthur picked up the empty mug from the table. He had not made any money from the boy. In fact, he had lost the cost of a hot chocolate, but he felt richer than he had all day. He had offered a safe harbor to someone in a storm. He had offered a little bit of warmth and kindness, and that, he was beginning to realize, was the real business of the Second Chance Cafe. Chapter 8. A Community of Misfits. Winter came. The days grew shorter and colder. A soft blanket of snow covered the city, making everything look clean and quiet. The Second Chance Cafe became a refuge from the cold. The warm lights, the smell of coffee and cinnamon, and the vibrant mural on the wall made it a cheerful, welcoming space. The cafe was no longer a place of strangers. It had its own little family, a collection of people who, for one reason or another, found comfort within its walls. They were a community of misfits, each with their own story of loss or loneliness. Lily was there every morning, her art career blossoming. The exhibition at the local gallery had been a success. She sold several pieces and received commissions for more, but she still came to the cafe to draw. It was her creative home. She was no longer the shy, nervous girl who had first walked in. She was a confident artist, her laughter often filling the room. George continued his afternoon ritual. His talks with Arthur became longer, more personal. He spoke less about the sadness of losing his wife, and more about the happy memories they had shared. The cafe had given him a place to grieve, but it had also given him a place to remember with joy. He started to talk to other customers too, sharing stories from his long life. He became the cafe's unofficial grandfather. Leo, the runaway boy, came back a few days after their first meeting. He came with his mother. She was a tired-looking woman with kind eyes. She came to the counter and thanked Arthur, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for looking after my son," she said. Leo stood beside her, looking embarrassed but grateful. After that, Leo became a regular. He would come in after school to do his homework. He was a quiet, smart boy. Arthur would sometimes help him with his math problems. And Leo, who was good with computers, helped Arthur set up a social media page for the cafe. Other people joined their small family. There was a young musician who would sit in a corner with his guitar, quietly composing songs. There was a freelance writer who used the cafe as her office, her table always covered in papers and books. There was a group of elderly ladies who met once a week for tea and gossip, their laughter like music. They were all different, but they had something in common. They were all looking for a place to belong, and they found it at the Second Chance Cafe. Arthur watched over them all. He knew their names. He knew how they liked their coffee. He knew their stories. He was the quiet center of this small universe he had created. He was no longer just a man who had lost his job and his wife. He was Arthur, the owner of the cafe. He was a friend. He was a listener. He had a purpose again. One snowy afternoon, a week before Christmas, the cafe was full. Every table was taken. The room buzzed with the gentle sounds of conversation, the clinking of cups, and the soft music playing in the background. Lily was showing George her latest sketchbook. Leo was explaining something on his laptop to the writer. The musician was softly strumming his guitar. Arthur stood behind the counter, looking out at the scene. He saw the warm, happy faces. He saw the connections that had been made in this small room. He thought about the day he had first stood in this same spot, in an empty, dusty, forgotten shop. He remembered the heavy silence and the cold feeling of loneliness. Now, the space was filled with life, with color, with warmth and friendship. He had wanted to fill an empty space. He realized now that he had done more than that. He had created a space where other empty people could come and be filled. A smile spread across his face, a genuine, happy smile. He thought of Sarah. He wished she could see this. He thought she would have loved it. She would have loved the people, the stories, the feeling of community. He felt a pang of sadness, the familiar ache of her absence. But it was different now. It was a gentle sadness, not a crushing one. It was mixed with a new feeling, gratitude. He was grateful for the crazy idea that had led him here. He was grateful for the hard work, for the pain on his hands and the ache in his back. He was grateful for Lily and George and Leo and all the others who had walked through his door. They had not just been customers. They had helped him heal. They had given him a second chance, just as the cafe had given them one. The bell on the door jingled, and a new customer came in, shaking snow from their coat. "Welcome," Arthur said, his voice warm and clear. "What can I get for you?" Chapter 9. The Power of a Simple Question. As Christmas approached, Arthur noticed a change in George. The old man still came in every afternoon for his tea and lemon cake, but he seemed quieter. The spark in his pale blue eyes had dimmed. He would read his newspaper, but sometimes Arthur would see him just staring out the window, a look of deep sadness on his face. Arthur knew that holidays could be difficult for people who were alone. They were a time for family and togetherness, and their absence was felt more sharply. Christmas would be the second one George would spend without his wife, Eleanor. Arthur wanted to do something, but he did not know what. He was not a man who was comfortable with grand gestures. He was a man of small, quiet actions. One afternoon, George was getting ready to leave. He put on his tweed coat, wrapped his scarf around his neck, and picked up his cane. "George," Arthur said, coming out from behind the counter, "I have a question for you." George turned. "Yes, Arthur." "What was Eleanor's favorite thing about Christmas?" Arthur asked gently. George was taken aback by the personal question. He was silent for a long moment. He looked down at his hands, then back up at Arthur. A soft, distant look came into his eyes as he traveled back in his memory. "Her gingerbread cookies," he said finally, his voice soft. "She had a special recipe from her grandmother. She would bake dozens of them every December. The whole house would smell of ginger and cinnamon. She would decorate each one by hand. Little men with smiling faces, stars, and Christmas trees. She loved giving them to the neighbors, to the postman, to everyone. He paused, a sad smile on his face. I haven't had one since well, I miss that smell. Do you still have the recipe? Arthur asked. George looked surprised. Yes, I think so. It's in her old recipe box somewhere. Would you be willing to share it with me? Arthur asked. I would like to try to make them. For the cafe, a flicker of something, perhaps surprise or gratitude, appeared in George's eyes. You would do that? I would be honored, Arthur said simply. The next day, George came to the cafe, not with his newspaper, but with a small old wooden box. It was Eleanor's recipe box. Inside were dozens of handwritten cards, stained with flour and butter from years of use. He carefully took out one card. The writing was a beautiful, looping script. Eleanor's famous gingerbread cookies, it said at the top. He gave the card to Arthur. Be careful with the ginger, George advised. She always said the secret was to use fresh ginger, not the dried powder. That evening, after the cafe was closed, Arthur stayed late. He cleaned the kitchen and laid out all the ingredients: flour, butter, sugar, molasses, and a fresh piece of ginger root that he had bought specially. He followed Eleanor's instructions carefully. He mixed the dough, his hands covered in the sticky, sweet mixture. He rolled it out and used cookie cutters to make little men and stars and trees. As the cookies baked, a wonderful aroma filled the cafe. It was a warm, spicy, sweet smell. The smell of Christmas. The smell of a happy memory. Arthur understood what George meant. It was a smell that felt like home. When the cookies were cool, he made some simple white icing and decorated them, just as George had described. His hands were not as delicate as Eleanor's must have been. His smiling faces were a little crooked. His stars were not perfect, but he did his best. The next afternoon, when George came in, a plate of Eleanor's gingerbread cookies was waiting on the counter. George stopped and stared at them. He picked one up, a little gingerbread man with a slightly lopsided smile. He brought it to his nose and inhaled the scent. His eyes closed. That's the smell, he whispered. That's it. He took a bite. He chewed slowly, thoughtfully. A single tear rolled down his wrinkled cheek, but he was smiling. It's perfect, Arthur, he said, his voice thick with emotion. It tastes just like hers. Arthur offered the cookies to every customer that day. He told them the story. These are Eleanor's famous gingerbread cookies, he would say. The recipe is from our friend George's late wife. People loved the cookies, but they loved the story even more. It was a taste of love and memory. George stayed later than usual that day. He did not just talk to Arthur. He talked to everyone who tried a cookie. He told them stories about Eleanor, about her love for baking, about their Christmases together. He was not just a sad old man anymore. He was the keeper of a beautiful story, and he was sharing it. The cafe was filled with his voice, with his memories, and with the warm, spicy scent of gingerbread. Arthur realized the power of a simple question. By asking about Eleanor, he had not reminded George of his loss. He had given him a chance to share his love. He had brought a piece of his past into the present, not as a ghost, but as a living, breathing, delicious memory. He had helped George feel less alone during a difficult time, not by ignoring his pain, but by honoring it. Chapter 10. The Christmas Surprise. The story of Eleanor's gingerbread cookies spread through the small community of the cafe. It created a warm, festive feeling that had nothing to do with fancy decorations or expensive gifts. It was about sharing, remembering, and kindness. A few days before Christmas, Lily came to Arthur with an idea. We should have a Christmas party, she said. her eyes shining with excitement. "Here, at the cafe, for all of us, for our little cafe family." Arthur, who had not celebrated Christmas since Sarah passed away, was hesitant at first, but then he looked around the room. He saw George happily telling a story to another customer. He saw Leo concentrating on his homework. He saw the writer furiously typing on her laptop. This was his family now, and they deserved a celebration. "That's a wonderful idea, Lily," he agreed. They decided to have the party on Christmas Eve, after the cafe closed to the public. It would be a simple potluck dinner. Everyone would bring a dish to share. The idea grew. Leo offered to make a music playlist of classic Christmas songs. The musician, whose name was Sam, said he would play some carols on his guitar. The group of elderly ladies offered to knit small scarves and hats as gifts for everyone. The writer said she would write a short, funny Christmas story to read aloud. The cafe buzzed with planning and excitement. It was a team effort. Everyone wanted to contribute. On the afternoon of Christmas Eve, Arthur closed the cafe a little early. He and Lily and Leo stayed behind to decorate. They did not have much, but they used what they had. Lily drew beautiful Christmas designs on the chalkboard with colored chalk. Leo folded paper into intricate snowflakes and hung them from the ceiling. Arthur put small, flickering electric candles on each table. Soon people started to arrive, carrying containers of food. The long counter was quickly filled with a feast. There was roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, salads, and all sorts of desserts. The air was thick with the delicious smells of food and the sound of happy greetings. George arrived, carrying a large apple pie. "Eleanor's recipe," he said proudly to Arthur. The cafe was more crowded and noisy than it had ever been. About 20 people were there, all the regulars, the misfits who had found a home in this place. They ate and talked and laughed. Sam played his guitar, and everyone sang along to the carols. Some a little out of tune, but all with great enthusiasm. The writer read her story, which was about a lonely coffee cup that finds a family, and everyone clapped. Arthur stood back, watching it all, a mug of warm apple cider in his hands. He felt a deep, profound sense of contentment. This was better than any Christmas he could have imagined. It was not about what he had lost. It was about what he had found. Then, Lily tapped a spoon against a glass to get everyone's attention. "We have a little surprise for Arthur," she announced, smiling at him. Leo came forward, carrying a large flat object wrapped in brown paper. It was clearly a framed picture. He handed it to Arthur. "This is from all of us," Lily said. To say thank you, Arthur was confused. He carefully unwrapped the paper. It was a painting, a beautiful watercolor painting. Lily had painted the cafe. She had captured it perfectly. The warm lights, the wooden tables, the colorful mural on the wall. But the most amazing part was the people. She had painted all of them, all the regulars, sitting at the tables, talking, laughing, being together. She had painted George reading his newspaper, Leo on his laptop, Sam with his guitar, and she had painted Arthur, standing behind the counter, a small gentle smile on his face. In the painting, he did not look lonely. He looked happy. He looked like he belonged. Arthur was speechless. He stared at the painting, his eyes blurring with tears. He had never received a gift so thoughtful, so personal. "We wanted you to know how much this place means to us," George said, his voice soft. "How much you mean to us, Arthur. You didn't just open a cafe. You built a home for a lot of lonely people." Arthur looked around at all their faces, smiling at him. He could not speak. He just nodded, his heart full to bursting. Later that night, after everyone had left, and the cafe was clean and quiet again, Arthur sat alone at one of the tables. The only light came from the small electric candles. and the streetlights outside, which cast a soft glow on the freshly fallen snow. He held the painting in his lap. He looked at the face Lily had painted for him. She had seen him. She had really seen him. He thought about the question he had asked his customers when he first opened. He had never actually answered it himself. What was his favorite drink to have in a cafe? He used to think it was a simple black coffee, strong and uncomplicated. But now he knew that was not true. His favorite drink was not a drink at all. It was the warm feeling in the room. It was the sound of quiet conversation. It was the sight of a sad man finding his smile again. It was the feeling of community. It was the feeling of having a purpose. It was the feeling of home. That was his favorite thing, and it was better than any cup of coffee in the world. Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed the story. Please consider subscribing for more English learning stories.